So, I had a conversation with a good friend of mine the other day, and it moved into a conversation about abortion briefly. And I've been pondering that conversation quite a bit recently. Now, this guy's a good dude, you know, moral person, nice guy, well mannered, well reasoned, and like the rest of us, an emotional creature, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with being emotional. Being overly emotional, that's an issue, but having emotions and compassion is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. But to the point, it got into basically the area was the rape, incest, life of the mother argument for abortion. And while I understand the desire to protect the fairer sex from the predations of men and the consequences of their predations, I have to say I think it's a more fundamental argument than it's not right to force a woman to carry a baby to term after she's been raped. While that's true, I think there's another layer there, right? Now let me just, as a prerequisite, let me just state that rape, incest, and life of the mother make up a very, 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 very tiny percentage of overall abortions in the United States. Put that out there. I think the fundamental question comes down to, what is life? When does life begin? I think there's sound arguments on both sides of the fence to argue different benchmarks for when life begins and when it's just a clump of cells. I do think it's odd, though, the same people who call a clump of cells non-life would hail it as the greatest human discovery in the history of mankind if those clump of cells were discovered on an alien planet, right? So there's kind of a double standard there, which is kind of odd. But I get it. I think that's driven by the emotional desire, not overly emotional, the emotional desire to treat people fairly and treat people nicely and to see what's in the uterus as the other, right? It's not on purpose and it's not meant to be evil. People they can look at a woman and see her face and see her as a person, and it's difficult to do that with what is growing in her womb, right? So you identify more with what you're looking at, and that's a selfish failing. And it's not, I'm not trying to say that it's a bad thing. I'm saying it's selfish because it's overly simple. It's easy for us, and it's easy for us, we want to do it, and that's the selfish part of it. It's easy for us to just identify with a woman and not identify with the life growing inside her, no matter how it got there. I think the argument that men shouldn't talk about abortion stuff, I think that's kind of weak, and I think it's an immoral argument. It's the same argument as you can't talk about crime in the black community unless you're black, but black people can talk about what it's like to be white. Some of it's so hypocritical that it's damn near laughable, but it's all the same argument. You're just slapping different labels on it. It's, you can't do this because you're not. You can't think this because you're not. You can't say this because you're not. No, I can point out immorality and I can point out morality just as easy as the next person, regardless of my genitalia, skin color, height, weight, eye color, hair color, what have you. It's not hard to be a reasoning being of any of those stripes. So yeah, you have to kind of figure out when life begins. Now you could say that life begins at conception, which I think is a pretty solid, rational, scientific, thought. You could say it begins, after X amount of months. I think it's kind of arbitrary. What are we looking at? Brain activity, heartbeat. People in comas have brain activities and heartbeats. Can we kill them just because they're in a coma, because they're not sentient at the moment? But you could say, well, that person has a chance of becoming sentient. So does a baby. So does a fetus. It has a chance, it has more than a chance of becoming sentient, right? The person in a coma may never come out of it. 99.99% of the time, that baby is going to gain sentience. That baby is going to become a thinking, rational human being, unwanted or not. So it's not so easy. And I think when something's not easy to figure out, I think it should be talked about in depth, right? I think when something's not able to be hashed out immediately, I think it's important. I think people who just blurt out the simple answer, it's life so you can't do it, or it's not life so you can do it, or rape, incest, life of the mother so do it or don't do it. I think that's kind of simple, and I think it's overly simple. Now, my personal feelings on the matter is, I get it, you were raped, that's terrible. The person who raped you should be chemically castrated, physically castrated, buried under the prison, and the prison should be set on fire. I have no tolerance for that kind of shit. But at the same point in time, I would say that the life growing inside of you has done nothing to deserve your ire and deserves a chance to live. I mean, I don't understand why that's difficult to grasp. I get why that. Like I said, I understand the knee-jerk reaction to say I can look at the woman's face and identify with the woman. I can't identify with what's growing inside her because I can't see it, I can't touch it, I don't know it. So it's easy to dismiss it. It's othering. We do it in society all the time. Maybe it's a human failing that'll never go away. I do know this: if there is a God, if you believe in that sort of thing, or Gaia, or Gia, or aliens, or what have you, I would think that whatever is looking down on this planet and looking at human behavior, where we abort something like 1 million babies a day or some shit like that. I know there was, at one point in time, there was more black babies aborted in New York than born. I think if you were a spiritual being or a higher entity looking down on our planet, you would probably be like, these fucking people are murderous. Like, they just want to keep doing this with their legs. They don't want the consequences of doing this with their legs. They, saying this, so they're murdering their own children so they can go back out to the club and do this with their legs. That's because that's most of it. That's fucking most of it. And the guys are no better, because the women want to use their sexuality to gain a mate. I get it. It's easy. It's easier than being smart or moral or kind or intriguing. It's easier just to lay there and do the V for victory with your legs. And you don't want the consequences, so you want to have the birth control and all the other stuff just in case you don't want the mate. The men, they're going to sit there and champion your right to abortion too, most of them, because fuck, what if they don't want to be with you? Get that shit taken out, bitch. Get a coat hanger, right? I don't care if you scraped up more times than a fisherman's knuckle. They really don't care. And I think that's really what it comes down to in most cases. Now, you look at what, the thinking of, what about children born with disabilities, right? Iceland has eliminated Down syndrome. How did they do that? They killed them all. They tested for Down syndrome and they murdered them in utero. Wonderful job. That's disgusting. But I don't know. In any case, that's my thoughts for the day. Happy Friday. Have a good weekend.